pleasure to talk to you, and let's see if I can get these things to work. Right. Okay. So, I'm going to talk about agriculture, feeding the world in 2050. And it's a big subject, actually. I think it's going to have a bit more, so it's going to be...
Got some time,
so. Okay, so I'm going to start out then with going back a bit to Thomas Malthus. In his essay on the principle of population, 1798, he predicted that with an unchecked population growth, which is exponential, but increased food production, which is arithmetic progression, that there would be a catastrophe of population crashes from disease, starvation, wars, and so on. Well, on the whole, he was wrong. I mean, actually, we have food production is kept up pretty well with the increase in population, although there are actually less people now, fewer people who are starving or short of food in the world. And what I hope to talk to you about is why, through science, technology, and sensible politicians and political decisions, that we should be able to feed 10 billion people sustainably by 2050. So, agriculture 4.0, well, I suppose 1.0, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, and about 12,000 years ago, agrarian societies developed, agricultural societies developed. And then that didn't change too much. Gregor Mendel, who was an Austrian monk, discovered the principles of genetics, Mendelian genetics. There were something underlying traits in, and I'm going to talk about crops, but underlying genetic traits in organisms. And that led to the Green Revolution and stopped several billion people from starving. In 1953, Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA and described how genetic information could be passed on from cell to cell. And since that's led to the gene revolution, if you like. And so agriculture 4.0 is the continuation of that in agri-bio, things like genome editing, and in agri-tech and food tech, which are all things coming along very rapidly. So next generation of technology is set to revolutionise the agriculture and food sector. So looking at globally, there are only about 8 countries in the world which are food self-sufficient. People in Australia get that, but we are an exporter. And for example, in Western Australia, we export 96% of the wheat that we produce. Whereas, for example, Japan is only 50% food self-sufficient. So trade in food is absolutely vital. And the peak bodies in Australia are predicting, or at least the goal for 2030 is to increase food production value from 64 billion a year now to 100 billion by 2030. So one of the things, I'll start with agri-bio, but one of the things driving this is the phenomenal advance in DNA sequencing technologies. So the first human genome was sequenced in 2001, 3 billion bases, cost $3 billion, and it took 15 years. By 2014, one machine could sequence more than 45 human genomes a day at the cost of $1,000 each. So you can see that the cost of sequencing has gone down and the ability to sequence has gone up. And so this technology is not only applied to humans, it's applied to crop plant genomes, animal genomes, to provide a knowledge-based approach to crop improvement. So we now understand a lot more about what underlies all the traits, the agricultural traits. And so whole genome sequences are available for all the major crops, wheat, barley, papaya, cucumber, apple, all the rest of these. Those sequences, genome sequences are worked out, and for their pests and diseases. So we can now apply that knowledge in a knowledge way rather than a sort of more random way. So this is a bit about conventional breeding and new breeding technologies, which are already here now. What you should remember is that all the food that we eat, unless you live on bush tucker, is genetically modified. Okay? Now, in conventional breeding, there's this cisgenesis one up here. That's cisgenesis. That means you can cross things in the same gene pool. And that's what the limitation is. But if you say you've got a variety here, a beneficial gene here, say it's a resistance to a pest, you make a cross, you do back crosses, and you get a new cultivar at the end, which has the introduced gene, but it actually also has this red bit. So it's unwanted genes. It's called linkage drag, so it's not very precise. And you don't really know what's in all those other genes, but that's conventional breeding with most of the food that you eat. So in transgenesis, that means you can isolate genes from unrelated organisms. Here's the beneficial gene. You can use a natural gene vector, agrobacterium, and transfer just that gene into a plant. And so it's very precise. But it extends the boundaries, so this could be from a bacterium. If you look at these other ones, well, cisgenesis, that's like this. It's the same gene, the isolated gene. Or intragenesis, that's where you can take it from the same organism. Genes from the same organism, just rearrange them, which is what happens in plant breeding anyway. Okay, but they all use exactly the same mechanism, but there are sometimes different views about this because these are from the unrelated organisms and these are from the same related individuals. Okay. And also what's coming along there is, you've probably heard of genome editing, CRISPR-Cas9 is a form of changing gene sequences without introducing any external DNA. So why can you do this? Why can you transfer genes from another organism? Well, you can see here green fluorescent protein from a jellyfish can be expressed in a nematode worm, in a plant, in mice, rabbits, fish. There's a zebrafish with different coloured fluorescent proteins. Why can you do that? Well, because a gene is a gene is a gene. It's got the same 4 bases in the DNA. It's got the same 20 amino acids in the proteins they code for. And so that's why you can transfer genes from one organism to another. And we eat hundreds of thousands of genes a day, and whether we eat an efficient chip separately, or if you had a fish gene in a chip, there I'll tell you actually, but if you had, it wouldn't make any difference to your guts, because that's we process all of those things. Okay, so it's now 22 years since the first genetically modified, or biotech crops were released, 1996. And what you can see here is that there's been a rapid increase. It's the most rapid uptake of any technology in agriculture, right? So this is now 190 million hectares. That's 10% of all the world's food crops are genetically modified. So 80% of the world's cotton, 77% soybean, a third of the maize, a third of the canola. And these are the countries, all the coloured countries, actually either produce or consume genetically modified products. So North and South America, some countries only consume, some have produced, and there's issues with political issues and social issues in Europe. But in Australia, we hardly produce any soybean and maize. So all the soybean, virtually, and virtually all the maize you get in your local supermarket, if you eat tortilla chips, it's going to be GM, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So there are now 24 countries growing GM crops, and 43 countries that are importing or using GM food. And perhaps I should point out that, for example, we talk about more about cotton. But any cotton product that you have, whether it's your underwear or whether it's your sheets that you buy from Myers, they're going to be from GM cotton. So why is it being taken up by farmers and so on? Well, because they've increased crop yields and they decrease pesticide use. It's actually very good for the environment. Here's an example, a case study from Australia. Cotton bollworm, major pest. It was a crop which required 10 to 15 insecticide sprays per year to control these insects, and of course there are beneficial insects that were killed by insecticides. Right. Now, so this, for example, is non-protected, so this is cotton, standard cotton sprayed 7 times. Okay, This is GM crops with a gene from Bacillus thuringiensis, which makes them resistant to cotton bollworm. You can see, here we are, no spray. If you have one of these without any spray, you don't get anything. You don't get anything. So you can see why there's been, 99.5% uptake in Australia of GM cotton. All the cotton is GM. Spectacular reduction in pesticide use, fewer cultivation passes, elimination of insecticide residues in the local rivers, no evidence of resistance building up, significant enhancement of on-farm biodiversity and beneficial insects. This is an absolute no-brainer. Much better to have genetic resistance than to use chemical resistance. Here's another example. This is late blight resistance to potato. This is what caused the Irish potato famine in the 1850s. So this is susceptible to Phytophthora infestans. And this is an example of a cisgenic GM resistance where a gene from, a resistance gene from a relative of potato from Argentina has been put into potato plants, and you can see here they grow quite happily and resistant. So you don't have to use fungicides to try and get rid of the Phytophthora. GM technologies could also deliver more healthy food. These are high anthocyanin tomatoes that produce this very dark, very high anthocyanin tomato juice. Here are limes. This has got one gene from, here has one gene from red grapes. This one's got one gene from blood orange. So these are, again, producing anthocyanins. You can switch off genes. This is non-browning apples. Well, that's browning, that's non-browning. You can see the difference here. Golden rice. Polished rice has no vitamin A, and so there are hundreds of millions of poor people who either die or have vitamin A deficiency or are blind. And so with two genes, you can make vitamin A produced in rice. And people like CSIRO are focusing on major lifestyle diseases in Western countries and diet. So to improve cardiovascular disease, to improve gastrointestinal health, reduce type 2 diabetes, obesity and weight control. So if we look at from 1996 to 2013 on the financial benefits, 133 billion, reduced chemical pesticides by 37%, increased crop yields by 22%, increased farmer profits 68%, reduction in CO2 emissions, and alleviating poverty of more than 16.5 million small farmers. I've been going to India for the last 20 years. I've seen that happen. So you might ask, well, is GM food safe? Well, AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science. Science is quite clear. Crop improvement by modern molecular techniques is safe. Even the EU, that hotbed of anti-GM, spent $500 million on 50 projects, 4,400 research groups, came up with exactly the same answer. And all of these learning societies and other studies across the world. So the consensus is the foods are subject to more testing than any other food, and everything tells us that they're safe. So if you look at what about the medical side then? Because of course you can use GM technologies in medicine. Well, a large proportion of the medicines now are actually GM. So, for example, insulin. You'd be really pleased that it's human insulin cloned in a bacterium or a yeast than having to go to cadavers or pigs. Most vaccines, if you had a flu vaccine in the last few weeks, that's pure recombinant product injected into your bloodstream. Cancer treatments, blood products, and so on. So why is it that direct injection or ingestion by people of pure GM products in medicine is accepted without any question whatsoever? And yet, for the last 20 years, if you're working in GM technologies, for agriculture, where you might have one gene in 30,000 which goes in your gut with all the other genes and things that are processed. We have to put up with this. And the reason is, it's not about science, it's not about the science at all. It's public misunderstanding of GM issues is mixed up with distrust and mistrust of large companies. Call it Monsantophobia. I'm going to have to change that because it's Monsanto's been taken over by crop science. So this is not about, it's about perceptions and all the other things, but it's not about the science. You can't discuss science with the people who do this. So that's part of the social license. Okay, so food safety. Then GM food is marginally the safest food because it's the most tested. Organic's the least safe. Don't believe all the misinformation and rubbish that you read on the web. This is from David Try from University of Melbourne. The chance of unintended changes with transgenic crops, that's GM, is less than the risk of unintended changes occurring in new crop varieties created by conventional breeding. Okay, in relation to that, this is another complete misunderstanding of the public. Natural does not necessarily equal good. In fact, most of the early plant breeding, and still even to lupins, for example, in Western Australia, is removing natural toxic compounds with which they defend themselves. And if you were a monkey being shot by a dark curare vine, curare from this vine, which is a potent antagonist of acetylcholine, you can understand that a lot of plants are very toxic, naturally, very toxic. And also there's a complete blurring between the definitions of what is and what isn't GM anyway. Because all the food we eat is genetically manipulated, as I said, breedings. That's translocation of chromosome arms between rye and wheat. All the wheat you eat has bits of rye, but it's not being done to be defined as such. So artificial crops. Triticale is a complete hybrid, right? Artificial hybrid, right? Mutation breeding, come to that. So the difference between what is defined as GM and is not defined as GM is just a matter of definition. Gene Technology Act says that. And it says we can say what is and what isn't GM. And some things are going to change because they've just had a review. So, mutation breeding. This is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. This is actually a Japanese mutation breeding centre. There's a bloody great cobalt-60 source in the middle, and you put your plants around, and they're irradiated with gamma radiation, right? And so what sort of things do you get? Ruby red grapefruit, seedless oranges, and 3,000 other varieties. What it does is it smashes up the DNA all over the place, and then you try to find somewhere the repair's giving you something beneficial. So here we are, ruby red grapefruit, 100% organic citrus, 100% GMO-free. This is rubbish, of course. It's highly, highly genetically manipulated. And so, so which moves me to gene editing, which is, of course, the scientific version of this, where using this CRISPR-Cas9 technique, we can specifically cut the DNA in 2 strands at one point, and then repair mechanisms here make mistakes to cause a mutation, so you can switch off the expression of a gene or a toxin. And it either adds or deletes a few bases from in the plant somewhere. Here's an example. Allergenicity in wheat, you know about the gluten, you go down your supermarket part, lines there. Well, we know there's a major allergen, it's a 33 amino acid. This has been targeted by genome editing, and these are actually plants with different deletions or insertions at that site. And a paper from Spain showed that in one hit, you can reduce 85% of the allergenicity in wheat. You could never do that by conventional breeding. So these very powerful technologies coming along for food improvement. Right. Okay, organic food. I have to say something about organic, because it's the most overused word. This is from a statement from the Secretary of State of the US. Let me be clear about one thing. The organic label is a marketing tool. It's not a statement about food. nor is it organic or value judgment about nutrition or quality. In fact, it's no better for you or for the planet. In fact, it's really bad for the planet. Why? Well, it's no more nutritious. There's lots of studies on that, despite what you might read. It's often much more polluting than per unit of food. It's not a guarantee of the most environmentally friendly product, and yields are 20 to 50% less than conventional production. It's all right for your backyard and small holdings. It's not. It's just completely impossible. Broad-scale agriculture. You probably haven't heard about sprout break in Germany, where there were 54 deaths and 3,800 people had renal failure from toxic E. coli and organic bean sprouts. But there's never been one case, authentic case, of any of the effects from GM foods. Then there's all this area, I'm sorry, I left it a bit to learn, Agri-tech, remote sensing, drones, precision farming, digital farming, robotics, artificial intelligence, irrigation. All of these things are coming along like an express train now because of connectivity in agriculture, electronics, remote, and all these other tech applications, not the genetic ones. And then there's food tech coming along as well. So Agri-tech provides farmers with new tools, data and knowledge to make informed and timely on-farm decisions. So future smart farms, farmer will be sitting in his office, it'll all be tech-based. We'll have drones, survey drones, agri-bots, texting cows, smart tractors and so on. Because this is an era of big data. It's big data both the bioinformatics, the biological side, and agri-tech and the farming side. You can yield map. You can now work out why is it this variation in yield in the field. What can we do to improve that? It's surprising how much variation actually there is in the pattern. Then there are massive opportunities to increase food production through things like pivot irrigation. That one's Kansas in the US. This is Wadi al-Rum in Jordan. This is Saudi Arabia. Just think of all the areas, if you apply the solar desalination, solar powered desalination, how much more you could improve. Protected farming, well you may not like this, but this is Spain, Mediterranean environment, this is 200 odd square kilometres of protected farming, providing vegetables for Europe, for Northern Europe. There's vertical farming where you, in one place in Japan, they produce 100 times the vegetables in 1 unit area. So you can have, using heat rooms, no external light, and hydroponics, you can produce vast amounts of foodstuffs in the centre of major cities and conurbations, and that's happening. This is sun-drop farms in South Australia. These are mirrors, which so a heliostat, which desalinates salt water and drives the whole production system where they sell to Coles. Just think of the areas in Australia or worldwide where this sort of technologies can be applied. All right, food resolution, better be quick. We need to reduce the amount of food by the type of food we eat by 2050 for the environment's sake. 71% more food needed, 87% less meat, 55% less resources. So, meat from plants. This is coming along. This is the Impossible Burger, made from all of it's made from plant products. The heme, the red, is from plant hemoglobins, leg hemoglobins. You'll sell in 5,000 stores in the US, can't sell enough of them. So this is the food tech side coming along. And I might point out that from a swimming pool size of water, you can make 312 beef burgers or 60,837 plant burgers in the same amount of water. So water usage is very important, land usage. So, in conclusions, we have to increase the productivity from currently cropped lands. And to do this, we have to apply disruptive technologies in agri-bio, agri-tech and food tech. And these can also help solve some environmental and climate issues as well. This will only be achieved, though, with a social license and evidence-based policies. Because you've seen from Monsantophobia that there are people who don't want to go on this path. So science can provide the solutions that politicians and others could prevent